Welcome to From the Spectrum podcast. This is a podcast about autism. It is my goal to explain what is autism. I intend to use a mixture of scientific literature, personal experience, and opinion. With opinion, I will explain why I feel the way I do and give examples. I will provide links to various references for each episode. For each episode, we will discuss various aspects of autism. The From the Spectrum podcast will mostly avoid causes of autism, and I will try avoiding the increase of diagnoses of late. This is like playing tug of war with barbed wire, and I don't think I want to travel down that path. For today's episode, we will discuss more symptoms of criteria A from the DSM-5 TR. Remember, these symptoms are crude and intends to capture the spectrum. Criteria A are deficits in social communication and interaction. We will cover criteria A as a part 2 before covering more of criteria B because of the amount of social interaction the world provides. In other words, criteria A captures our socialness. In other words, can you fit into the social norms in our environment and culture or not? Are you like the so-called normal people or not? Typically, autistics are more interested in facts, reality, and logic than they are make-believe or fairy tales. I am extremely methodical. I believe this is a superpower. Some have said too methodical. It's just too much for them. It's just too much for others. I see bottlenecks in society. I see things that are wrong or could be better. And I try to fix that, or I point those out with hopes that maybe somebody can fix them. And if not, if I can't do anything about it, it's very annoying. It's very annoying every time that I have to encounter that. And whenever I do encounter it, it's just rapidly going through my mind how this doesn't make sense. And I am very much annoyed when people say, well, that's just the way it is. I hate, well, that's just the way it is. However, we stand strong and still prefer the methods and structure of processes over navigating unknown exploration. This has vast implications to relationships and socialness. I hate, maybe more than anything, people apologizing to me. Traffic annoys me. Remember the B movie Example. Often it feels like others are disrupting the flow and productivity of the day, especially turning lanes and turning lanes at stoplights where time is crucial. Notice the next time at a turning lane, the distance in between cars as they're traveling and moving. Walking across parking lots or where cars travel. When people are walking diagonal and increasing the time in the car's path. If you go diagonal, you're increasing the time it takes to cross. And maybe that is disrupting the flow of traffic. Just walk straight across to get across and then turn towards your destination. I know This item has some criteria B in it as well. I am horrible with names, especially the names that I know I need to remember. I must associate something about them to them. A favorite for me is connecting a famous person to them, when possible. When I was younger, late teen and early adult, others would disagree with my famous person associations. However, it typically worked for me. The trouble with names remains as an adult. However, I have superpowers and remember silly nuances and details about others. Recently, I spent the first 2 weeks in a new higher education program looking at other students in our small cohort and quizzing myself on their names. Later in the semester, I called someone Landon. Landon is not his name. And that struck me as something that the other students was not experiencing. By then, it seemed they have picked up on each other's names. I suspect my monotone voice and low voice saved me from many people hearing. I hate when people repeat things to me. You already said it, at least once, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times. Why? I hate when people say, like I said. I hate, like I said. 1, it is unnecessary. And 2, it means you're about to repeat something. I often say to myself, this doesn't make sense. When I'm out in the social world, I often say, this does not make sense. And I observe and think about how much verbal conveyance is unnecessary in the social world. So, it's probably no surprise. Romantic interests are complicated. They do exist from time to time, but they are rare. And often, I suppress them, or they just don't last long. Thankfully. I know other autistics are the same way, so that makes me feel better. And romantic relationships do not exist on a spectrum. I think that was a decent joke. Romantic relationships or interest are either falling in love fast or zero interest. And typically, that so-called falling in love fast, and I use that loosely, meaning I'm just trying to capture the meaning here. It does seem to happen, but I maybe put quotations around that. Perhaps we could put love in quotations too. Who knows what that is? Modern definitions confuse me. Examples include cisgender and pansexual and so forth. I have looked up cisgender, the definition, but I cannot seem to retain it. I just cannot understand why it's relevant or what purpose it is. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I hate when people say my name to capture my attention. It requires a verbal reply to them. Just say what you are going to say. Skip the other part. It is not necessary. This might sound silly, but lots of times that reply wears me out. Remember the metabolic energy. 1, just say what you're going to say. But 2, I am blasting out that energy with whatever I am thinking about. Remember, I'm probably within myself here. I'm fixated on something, a thought, an interest, and just evaluating things in my head, where I want to be, where I enjoy being, and prefer to be. And shifting this attention requires a lot at times, even though I can still hear you and I can still follow you. It's not uncommon that people with autism have superior hearing. Remember the sensation and the rapid firing and the increased rate with the excitation and inhibition? We can hear you. I'm with you. I'm following. You cannot know about this unless this is you. So please don't try. This will likely sound ludicrous to you. So what? And maybe now you can understand why we have a propensity of being monotone too. Get it? Understand it? Just remember how powerful criteria B components are. Regarding the sound blends discussed in the first episode of Criteria A, remember the Beatles comparison. This has a rapid onset, meaning it is here without warning. But however, as I have gotten older and maybe experienced and learned about myself, I can notice this at times. However, it's still coming on quickly. I can notice those slight nuances happening inside my body. Or it is just an overprotective factor warning me. Remember the first episode about this protective measure. I don't know the case, but this is coming on rapidly. Social media and putting good deeds out on social media confuses me. I think this is strange. For instance, when people give or donate something and then they post a picture of themselves doing that deed. I don't quite understand that. I know I evaluate that feeling as strange, and that's my evaluation of the situation. But I tend to lean towards that higher power, the message of this higher power of saying you don't need that affirmation whenever you do these types of actions. Maybe even better to keep that secret. When I force myself to make eye contact, and I do, I try to improve this and work on this. Often I find myself noticing I am staring at one eye, and I will wonder if they notice I am looking at just one eye. I wonder if they look at a specific eye, or if people just look at a general area around the eyes. This whole eye contact phenomena is very fascinating to me. Remember, I kind of went off on the previous episode of it's not necessary for communication, but humans say it is. But we're not exactly always right. You cannot look at both eyes at the same time anyway. We are not birds. We only have one fovea, not two. And the sixth cranium nerve, the easy one, the abducens, prevents us from looking at both eyes at the same time. In social settings, often I just leave. No goodbyes or anything. I suspect others, especially family gatherings and so forth, I expect they have noticed. Two things. One, enough has been enough, and it's just time for me to go. And two, I hate those standard goodbyes. Remember the awkward phone conversations too. This stuff is just awkward to me. But I suspect this manifests from questioning and communication about that, such as, where are you going? Or, what are you going to do? Or maybe, why are you leaving so soon? And finally, you're leaving already? Those comments and questions are just awkward. Yes, I am leaving. Enough already. And I have found out, you don't need me. The gathering will gather without me. And that's another joke, by the way. I have found, as an adult, I can better control this. I can negotiate having this experience, or just avoiding it altogether. Just avoiding those seemingly pseudo conversations. Remember, I like and I need that out in a social setting. That makes the commitment to the social setting easier. It's very complicated. High fives and so forth are strange. Have you ever watched people doing this? Seems like people mostly go through the motions, or reflexive emotions. Now, at times, these emotions do spark, and they're releasing some sort of emotion. Yet, because they are not autistic, and this motor movement, or because they don't have a motor disorder, like Tourette's or tics or ADHD, that action, that high five movement, is not considered stereotypy or stereotypy, whatever is your preference. I hate when people do favors for me. The reciprocity is strange. So are the feelings of thankfulness. And I hate the feeling like I owe someone a favor. Really, I often pay back much greater because, just quite frankly, I don't know what is even or appropriate. I wonder if others feel this. And consider a comparison of the favors. Is it equal? Does your favor and my favor have to match? Is this appropriate? This is very awkward. How equal does the payback need to be? So, I rather not others do favors for me. Remember, we are self-sufficient and can manage that isolated environment. I often think I would rather be Henry David Thoreau than navigate the social world. I think Thoreau's quote, "Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth." I think that hits autistics just right. Remember the self-sufficiency. We're very efficient for ourselves. And this is learned over time. Remember, this starts at a young age. Maybe even before the critical period. And it just continues with us every moment of our life. This is preference. This is neuroplasticity. It kind of reminds me of this, as I've observed the masses in society. We're in this experiment now for over 20 years, it seems, like with self-checkouts. This is a preference now for the masses. It's just preferring the self-checkout. We'll just do it ourselves. It's reliable. We know what to expect here. We have come to prefer this, and we've learned to just incorporate this into the experience of whatever it is we're shopping for, wherever we are shopping at. And just from observations and conversations, both direct and indirect, it's just people prefer the self-checkout now. And this is how I think autistics live their life. We just prefer to be self-sufficient. Occasionally, when people do something for me, I get extremely thankful. And this is occurring on the inside. And that feeling can be awkward. Experiencing emotional empathy is intense. I cannot convey how it makes me feel accurately, but it is intense. My inability to convey this is not on me or you. We are just unique with a capacity for different experiences and emotions. Even just a slight difference changes everything between humans. Okay, I have spent a significant amount of time reflecting over my life. I have the time and opportunity and the pleasure of doing this. I am not talking about rumination or harmful thinking and such. I am talking about debriefing the events and my experiences. What went well, what didn't. Remember that critical thinking and appraisals of myself covered in the first episode of Criteria B. Remember others that interact with me on this doesn't touch my level of critic. There's no way that you are going to be more harmful or more critical of me than I am of me. This is opportunity to understand myself and understand others. However, it maintains the perfectionism, and perfectionism is often seen in autism. Mistakes are nearly non-negotiable or unacceptable to me. So all of that to explain this. As far as I can remember, I absorb other people's lives. The interactions or observations are intense. I will consume them. And after the interaction or observation, remember, this is visual thinking. I am running their life through my head like a movie, and it's very captivating. I will continue the thoughts and visualization, piecing together information about their life, especially if there are future interactions. Plus, this is an opportunity to confirm or correct things about others. Often, I find it accurate. To normalize this, I do it because I have a strong, genuine curiosity of others. I can't help it. The emotional empathy type is intense. This activity fills a good portion of my time. It's like another way to supplement relationships, or, of course, the lack of relationships. However, if it interferes with my criteria B, I can easily task switch and get onto my fixated interests that are perfect in intensity or focus. I just made another joke there. It was a shot at the DSM, which uses abnormal to describe the intensity or focus on the fixated interest. They say it's abnormal. In short, emotional empathy is moving, just physiological responses, and it's very moving on the inside. Also, on the echolalia, this can be if we are hitched on a word or phrase while interacting, or it can simply be something catchy, something that catches our attention. Sometimes it is just us slowing down time, trying to keep up. And sometimes it is us having words or phrases catch our attention. And songs are brutal to me. Songs frequently get stuck in my head, and it takes deliberate action, deliberate attempts to remove those from my head. I think the last thing I want to cover is fitting in. It's hard. You probably know this already. It's complicated for us, or for me, if we don't want to generalize it. When younger, to ease the social pressure, I would mimic famous people, or people I enjoyed, and so forth, and try to look like them, and try to act like them. I was a teen in the 90s, and New York hip-hop emerged and made its way to my small town, and we liked it. For me, it was the art of the hip-hop beat and the lyrical flow just how that gelled and meshed together. We were teens and very malleable. At least I was, or maybe I was more so than the other neighborhood kids. Being like others removed the pressure and stress and gave me a blueprint on how to act in the social world. So here I mentioned New York hip-hop and said blueprint. If you know, you know. Also, as a young adult, we were into like older rock and roll, like the Beatles, Grateful Dead, Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan, and so forth. So that was my blueprint. It was extreme, it was bizarre, and it made socialness easier. So be it. So in short, with the 90s hip hop and then the older rock and roll, that gave me a model to how I want to present myself in social settings. As we wrap up today, I want you to understand the complications we have with socialness, the social communication and interaction, and how there's a lot going on the inside. Remember the episodes on the excitation and inhibition and how difficult it is to interact and keep up, keep pace, make meaning of everything, and so forth. If you are listening and enjoy the episode or enjoy the podcast, please feel free to leave me a review or rating. In podcasting, reviews, ratings, and downloads are huge. And I very much appreciate your feedback. If you would like to contact me, you can reach me by email at info.fromthespectrum@gmail.com. And before we end, I would like to remind you, don't try to change an autistic person because they are different than you or different than others. And don't let that offend your beliefs and capacity to apply critical thinking in life. Thank you for listening to From the Spectrum podcast.